Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You are here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and entrepreneurial success. And we are very lucky with our guest today. Our guest today is Margaret Agard. Her website is inhisfootsteps.com, so you can get an idea which direction we're going into. What Margaret will be speaking about today is how listeners, entrepreneurs, people of the world overbook and overwork themselves because they are run by their to-do lists. Now, those of you who write long to-do lists every morning, every night, just stay tuned, please. Welcome to the show, Margaret Agard.
Hi, Joanne. I'm happy to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
I am grateful that you are here because your topic is vital to my listeners, including business owners, entrepreneurs, people who have followed me for years, and I'm grateful for all of them. So give the guests, the listeners, some insight as to how you found your way here.
I was at the point where I started this practice. I was a single mother and the sole financial support of 8 children. I was an executive in the high-tech industry. And eventually I did start my own consulting business. And from that, I actually started an online business where I was selling products. And so I know what it's like to build a business, to have employees, to be concerned with time, and to be a parent, and to have to figure out how to arrange my day. And at the time I started this practice, my to-do list was undoable. As an executive in the high-tech industry, one of the few women, I knew how to set priorities. I knew how to go through and do the most important things, not just the most critical things, to move a plan along. And yet, at that point in my life, I had also decided to finish. I had 1 year left to finish a bachelor's, and I decided to finish that and go to school full time. Any of those 3 things could have been considered a full-time job. And I was trying to do all 3. And I was getting about 4 hours sleep a night and thought, I'm exhausted and I don't know what to give up. It's not like I gave the kids away and they had to eat. I couldn't give the job up, and I wanted to stay in the industry, and the industry was changing because so many people were going public and they needed their executives to have some kind of, this person has this degree or that degree as well as this experience. So there I was. And that's when I started handing my to-do list over to God.
Well, for those who are listening, what Margaret just said is probably the highest regard that she can have, is handing her to-do list over to God. And the other thing, of course, is how she did this with 8 kids. But that's another story. As she said, she can't give up the kids. You had to reframe her entire life. So how did you give up your to-do list to God?
The way it started is I had, in a couple of weeks, similar things happen where I would do something such as finish a paper for a class and walk in only to find out a note on the door, the class was canceled. The professor was ill and we had another week to do the paper, or which you could do back then. It wasn't being turned in online. Or I would go to a client and I would have a proposal. And as I walk through the door, they say, we've just been talking about it and we want to completely revamp the direction we're heading. So thanks for the proposal. We want you to redo it. And I think, oh my gosh, if I could just see the future, I would have spent time doing other things. And then I thought, well, you know what? I know someone who does see the future, knows what's coming, and I'm going to ask God what I really need to get done today on this long list that I have. And that's how the process started. Well, that eventually morphed into not what do I need to do today, but what do you want me to do today?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when my life really changed. But even just what do I need to do today? I started looking through my list and thinking, okay, I don't need to do this. I don't need to do this. This can wait. But I would usually get a few things added to the list. And it was almost always to do something to help someone else, make a phone call, drop by a neighbor, something like that. And after a few weeks of it, I was finished every night by 8 instead of, midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could sit and relax as long as I didn't add things. And if you're used to being busy, sometimes it's hard to sit and relax. You think, well, I'm sitting here with an extra 2 hours instead of just visiting with the kids. I could actually go do something else. But if I just focused on what was on my list for the day, everything got handled. And I stopped stressing. I stopped worrying because I knew what needed to be done was done.
Well, for those of you who are listening right now going, oh, really, that doesn't work. That's not true. Well, I don't really want to burst your bubble, but I'm going to do it anyway. People who are certainly entrepreneurial in spirit don't follow the guidelines of the rest of the world being 9-to-5ers or 8-to-6ers or whatever those hours are. When you're an entrepreneur, you can do whatever you darn well please. And the point of view that Margaret has is that she gave up everything to God as far as the decisions go. I've been doing that myself as well for a long time. And it takes courage to do that because you want to be in control, quote unquote, control of everything. My question is in the morning usually, and I have more than God. I have God and other like-minded people on my committee. And, what do you want me to do today? It's that simple. And even though, some of you may go left brain, no, got to do this, got to do that. No, you don't. Somebody else will take care of it.
That's exactly what I found. Someone else would take care of it, or it turned out it didn't need to be done.
It wasn't important. Yes.
It wasn't important. Right. Or the need changed. Something else came up. Now, what I think sometimes when I think about talking to entrepreneurs is it's possible you're running very fast in the wrong direction. And you're maybe even going to end up someplace where you're going to sit there thinking, this isn't where I want to be. This isn't where I thought I was going to be or what I thought it was going to be like. And by taking this shortcut to basically discovering my true self, my true purpose, this is what got me there. This is what changed it.
And I think it also speaks to our ego if we think that we know everything. And we don't. And we do. But we have to figure out who we trust in the process. Because if we think we need to be in charge of everything, it's going to be my way, this way, that's ego speaking. And ego will keep you alive, but it won't necessarily help you move forward because ego wants to win all the time. When you bring in spirit or God, Margaret's perspective on that may be different than mine, but when you bring God into it, it's what's for the greater good.
Good question. Good point. Good point. Because I think that's where we end up. And that's where our greatest happiness comes.
Absolutely. Because it's interesting that you're speaking these most recent 50 words or so, because just read an article this morning about this woman who moved from Denmark to California in the late 90s. And, her conditioning when she was growing up was such that she would be whatever, let's just say a bricklayer. That's not what it is. And so her entire life was structured literally around that concept, but it wasn't who she wanted to be. Not that she knew who she wanted to be. But when she took a step back, she realized that's not who she was. And how did it affect her life? So when we look at our lives and make these decisions at the age of 8 or 9 or 10 or 15 or 18, that this is who we are, this is what we're going to do, we leave no openings for spirit to step in, or the universe, or intuition.
good point. And that's what I found is, excuse me, I got a completely different life than I thought I was going to have. And I love it. It's like, I never knew I would love this. I once took a course. This is going to sound so dumb, but it was a course in weaving. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'm going to be just so bored, just sitting there like passing a shuttle back and forth. And it turned out I loved it. And that's how I feel about my life. I don't think I would have set a goal for myself and said, I want to become a writer. I want to be on podcasts. I want to talk about, how we can turn our lives over to God by giving him our daily to-do list, because you know what? Our to-do list is our life. Today is our life. And so I'm just surprised at how much I love it.
Well, I hope our listeners are listening to your words. I always recommend that the listeners re-listen to the podcast with a pen and paper in hand and take notes, because guaranteed you're going to miss stuff if you don't. So how does one step into this life of letting go, letting God, and those, I didn't make those words up. I've read them somewhere, I'm sure, and they just popped into my head, and stop being overworked because they, turn their to-do list over to God. How can they start, assuming they're not just going to go 100% all in? Did you find in retrospect, or even during the process for yourself, that there was a way to do it without crashing or spinning and burning or something like that?
I did. And it's interesting because and at the time that I started this, I was living in the DC area, which has, busy, fast traffic and lots of stuff going on. And I just started doing it in the morning. And the reason that didn't work for me is because by the time I got out of bed, I was so committed to my to-do list, and I just leap out and start right on it without even thinking to pause for a minute. So I found it worked best to do what maybe you do, which is to write it at night and to look through it. And I do it with a thought I can connect to the divine. And I think I was on one show, she just called it your inner guiding or your intuition. And I can look at it and know this doesn't have to be done. This does. And sometimes I question it. And when I question it, I often get an answer. I'll say, well, I thought I had to have, I think once it was returning library books, and it was before the internet where you could go online. And I thought, they're going to be late if I don't return them, kind of like that. Like, don't add this to your schedule. And the answer came, just call and renew them over the phone. Cause I'm like, owe 50 cents.
I know.
I know.
What we do to ourselves. Yes.
Right. And once when we had the internet business where we were shipping product, we always did the orders first. And that was always the top thing on my list, ship the orders. And one Monday it was don't ship the orders. And that had never been questioned before. I thought, I don't know how it is up in heaven, God, but down on earth, when we say we ship next business day, we ship next business day. It's Monday. I'm shipping them. And it was half the orders because it would be the orders from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I just ignored that and shipped the orders, except it turned out, as entrepreneurs, we often don't pay attention to our calendar. It turned out it was President's Day and the post office wasn't open. So I couldn't ship the orders on Monday. And my day would have gone a lot smoother if I had waited until Tuesday to ship those orders. Yeah.
So my question would be, at this moment in time, how long did it take you, if you're willing to share that point, how long did it take you to fully trust the process of, letting God make those decisions, letting your power, letting the intuition go, and not being in control 100%?
It is extremely difficult, especially I think a lot of entrepreneurs come from a background, where they might have come from a dysfunctional home. And even in those homes, need to be in control is part of it. But in my case, it came pretty quickly because the change was so significant. If anything, what really happened is at some point, once it was under control, I thought, oh, now I don't have to keep asking, because it seemed needy of me to have to ask what I needed to do each day, if that makes sense.
Of course.
I decided, sure, I'll just take it back now. So thanks, God, but no thanks. And when I took it back, I ended up in the same spot. And so as I started to hand it back over, that's when the thought came, maybe I'm asking the wrong question. Maybe I should be asking, what do you want me to do today? And so speaking to that, that's when I really began to get moved in the direction of my true purpose and my true self. And, I will still sometimes think, are you sure? Are you sure?
And the ego steps forward.
Yeah. I get that, you're the great creator and you know everybody, but are you sure? And yes, it always works out. So the more that happens, of course, the more my trust grows. And it does take time.
So for those of you who are listening, neither Margaret nor myself are certifiable. We might be just appear to you to be a little off the wall, or, slightly crazy, a little quirky, and I'll take that. That's fine. But what I've learned to do, several years ago, I was in between whatever I was doing before and whatever I was going to do next. And I worked with, quote unquote, a career person. And what he told me, some of the words he told me were profound and stayed with me forever. He says, you don't have to think about it. He says, you have intuition. You should use that. And I said, what's that? I had never, I was an adult, well into being an adult when I first heard the word intuition. He says, you take leaps and bounds in directions that nobody else can see, because that's who you are and that's what you're capable of doing. And that is your gift. And it was like, oh, then I had to step back and look at it. So for those of you who are not Christian, who are not religious, who are not whatever, just call it your intuition or your inner wisdom, or something that you can accept as a possibility as opposed to ego, because the ego does interfere. And listen to what Margaret is telling you and see how it can fit.
It's interesting because I do talk to people who say, whether or not they're Christian, they'll say, I have learned that if a person comes to mind, then I know to immediately reach out to that person. You're going through your day, you know hundreds of people, you have lots of relatives. And one day you're just going along and someone that you knew in high school pops into your head, and somehow you should find a way to contact that person. There's something there that either that person has to offer you or you have to offer them.
Yes. And the other thing that I will say too is you have to listen. If you want to start practicing giving your list to God, or not even creating a list at all, and then waiting for God to tell you what to do, you have to listen. You have to listen to the inside. You can't, without listening, you've got nothing.
So I do listen. And as I said, I started doing it at night because by the morning I'm too committed. And I do feel like God needs me to have thought about things.
Yes.
So then as he gives me direction, I can go a different direction. I remember once I made a list of what I thought was a great day. And I thought, wow, I'm helping a few people and I'm getting some things done here that way. Right. And I thought, this is a good list. God's going to like this one. And I took it in. I'm so proud of myself. Little pats. And as I took it to him, the thought came, this is a good list. And I thought, thank you. And he said, would you mind if I changed it? And I thought, well, no, that's why I'm here, right? And he said, really what I'd like you to do tomorrow is just spend time with your husband. And my husband's the kind of person who never thinks about himself. He's always helping other people. And he's often in physical pain. He's tense and his muscles are overworked. And the thought came, just spend time with him and, give him a massage. So I thought, okay. And to me, that's also how God works. He knows what we really need to be doing and what not. He never It's not like my house ended up a filthy mess and I ended up in poverty. Actually, the opposite happened.
Yeah, people don't understand that fulfilling the needs that are necessary are more important than what we decide we need to do. Because again, it's that issue of control. No, this is okay. I can do this. And God goes, no, just rip up that list and do this.
Often, Joanne, I'm sure you found the same thing. That's when sometimes I'll get a hint of a huge project, like start a podcast, or in my case, a few years ago, it was start a radio show, or build a house.
Write a book.
Write a book. It was write a book. And I thought, I don't know how to do that kind of thing. And then I have to take the time to learn to do it. And I remember with my radio show, the first half hour or 45-minute segment that I did took a week. Just the whole thing of learning how to record it and how to edit it, and such a mess. And I wasn't a very good interviewer, so I'm like moving questions around and their answers, so it made more sense. And, after I'd been doing it a few months, I could get that thing out in an hour.
Tell us about your books, because I think that people would be excited about them.
I have 2 books. The first book, In His Footsteps, I gave my to-do list to God, got more done, more sleep, less stress. And that basically goes through all the things I ran into and the things that happened as I followed, the times I questioned, the times I listened, what I confronted in myself to actually make that happen. So at the end, I'm actually able to say, and this is not what I expected to learn, I learned how much God loves us. And how loved we are, how beloved we are. And when I used to do things, it was, just to prove that I was a good person. But by the end of the book, I am doing it because I feel so loved, and I want other people to feel that love too. And then the second book is actually about serving as missionaries. The third book that I'm working on is about marriage to my husband. And again, that came from God. It was a second marriage, and it was in February, he said, you're going to meet the person you're going to marry next fall. And I thought, no, thank you.
Been there, done that.
Yep. And I have 2 teenage sons at home, stepfathers, teenage boys, thinking that's not going to go well. And it actually, I would like to say it went well and it didn't go well. I would have thought, well, match made in heaven, that should be great, right? Not quite. But what I was promised is that we would all be made whole or healed emotionally as a result of this marriage. And that took some effort. And that's what that book is about.
Well, that's going to be amazing as well, because there are so many people. I mean, you see it every day, at least I do, in one shape or another, that, they get married a second time or a third time, whatever. And I know someone very popular in part of the world that I hang out in who married somebody, his first, her third. And I says, God, maybe this one will work for him and her,
Yes.
Who knows?
Yes.
I think it'll work, but it's like, sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you just have to do that. Do something.
Yeah. So I think when I look back at it, what I think is, I was very busy and I was accomplishing a lot, but I wasn't fulfilled and I wasn't particularly happy, although I was successful. It always feels good to be successful, right? To be at the top of your game. But there was, what I think about it now, what I think is, do you want to spend your life chasing after something that it turns out doesn't really matter? Or do you want to spend your life doing the things that are most true to you and that make a difference in the world? And I think of a man who was in real estate, very successful in real estate, and also religious. He almost felt embarrassed for being successful in real estate. So he shared with us, he shared with us in a publisher's meeting, actually, that he actually was questioning, should he keep doing real estate? And he felt like God said to him, are you asking if it's okay to make money and be wealthy? He was like, I guess I am. And he said, well, it depends on the reason. I mean, it's fine to do it. It's what are you going to do with it once you have it? So.
Yes. It's not a sin to make money. So before we go to the end of this, do you have any a couple of tips for our listeners who are on the brink of doing what you suggest and what I support in, giving it up to God and so on and so forth? Do you have any things that they should do now?
I say most people who are entrepreneurs, people who are working, is just take that list you have. Just take that list and sit down with it and pay attention to your inner voice, to God, to your intuition, to whatever you call it, and try it. It's like science. Just try it. See what happens.
Well, okay, listeners, you can't get any better or easier than that. It might be difficult as well if your ego steps in, but try it. Just try it. You can find more information on Margaret's website, which is called In His Footsteps, which is a beautiful title, inhisfootsteps.com. I think there are opportunities for you to purchase the first 2 books and get on a list to find to receive information about the 3rd book once it's published. So any final words to our audience, Margaret?
No, I just wish them well.
There we go. I want to thank people for listening, and I want to thank Margaret for being here today as a stunning guest. Goodbye, everybody. See you next time.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.